You're listening to Beyond Boss Fights, gaming, technology, movies, and more.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to Beyond Boss Fights, episode 40. Let me see if I can find my show notes. There they are. This is Rex Wolf. I'm your host, and with me, as always, straight out of Natty, is DJ Pimp Daddy.
Woot woot.
With his woot woot. And for the special episode 40, which is a milestone episode, especially when you go as slow as we do, we have brought in the Honorable Roger Edwards, formerly of the Contains Moderate Peril podcast and currently of the Contains Moderate Peril blog. Welcome, Roger, very much.
Hello there. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me on such an august occasion.
Well, as you know, our quality standards are very high on this show, so we will be watching your performance carefully.
Okay. I think I'm on the show. Surely it must be the opposite. But
Now, Roger, this isn't your first time on the show. You've been here actually probably more than just about any other guest. So do you want to go over what you've been up to? I know it's been quite a while since the last time you were on.
yeah, sure. I'm not going to fly in the face of tradition. What have I been up to? I've been keeping my head down during this global pandemic thing. And I've been keeping myself busy and out of trouble. Is it traditional for me to talk about what I've been up to gaming wise?
Yeah, we're going to get to that later, so we'll get to that. So we're still in the reasonable banter section, so we have to be reasonable and banter at the same time, which is really difficult to do.
Well, I've been doing my best in the last 14 months not to get seriously ill. Which I broadly have managed to avoid, although I did actually get COVID, but I got over it, but it wasn't a pleasant experience. I certainly wouldn't want to do it again. And life goes on. I'm a full-time carer. I look after my disabled mother, and so that's been keeping me busy. So it's really weird because the whole sort of day-to-day life routine that we all face at the moment is pretty much my day in, day out every day. So for me, it hasn't been such a massive adjustment as it has been for other people, as it were.
So I did want to ask you, I know you've thrown kind of casted the bait out there a couple times with regards to participating in podcasts. Is there something that you've really missed about being involved with podcasting and that kind of content creation? And what have you been doing instead of that?
Right into the hard-hitting questions.
I've just been trying to maintain the presence on the website. There are days and there are times of the year when you feel really enthused and you have a lot to write about and a lot to share. And then there are other days when you have to sort of really focus to sort of get a post out there. I miss podcasting. It was really curious earlier on. I fired up Skype, and that's how me and Brian used to do the Contains Moderate Peril podcast originally. And there was a massive nostalgia vibe because the amount of times that we did podcasts and then our recording apparatus broke and then be left with two-thirds of a show and not necessarily a good one. But no, I miss it. I think it's nice to be able to talk about what's happened recently. Things like topical events you can touch on what happened at E3 and stuff and chew the fat over that. I miss that. I've always wanted to do a particular movie-based podcast because that is my great passion, as it were. And that's something that I've always toyed with, but I've never quite got off the ground because I think shows work best when you've either got 1, 2, 3, or maybe 4 people and you can riff off each other. You can debate points, politely disagree. Doing a show on your own is hard. I know several people who do it and they work really hard. I've tried doing it on my own. It's difficult. It ends up coming across like it's too scripted. That's what I find. So, I tried that, and I've even had my own forays into Twitch, which were great if you just want someone open up loot crates in Star Trek Online.
Which I've watched.
Yes. And God bless you, sir. Somebody had to.
So every time I'm at work, I see your tweet saying you're either live streaming or you posted a blog article, and I love interacting with your live streams. But every time I go to click on your blog articles, I have to do it on my phone because for some reason my corporate network blocks your website. I can't figure out why.
That's
It could be because it's perilous.
It's weird. Out of all the people that I know that write blogs, 90% of them use WordPress. And I seem to be the only one who's drifted into using Squarespace. And I just wonder if it's a Squarespace thing.
I
Mainly for technical reasons, not for sort of censorship reasons. I mean, there's nothing particularly controversial going on my blog, apart from the fact that I'm writing it. But
Now, from a security standpoint, though, if a blog was going to, or if a website was going to be dangerous to your corporate network, I don't think they'd put it right in the title of the site.
Exactly. Danger.com. We have our first question in chat from Andang. He asked, how far beyond the boss fight are we?
Yeah. What's a boss fight again?
I said that we're moderately beyond it, but that's just a guess.
We will talk about some gaming. We'll get there.
Beyond the boss fight, but definitely beyond the Poe.
All right, I think it's time to move into our acknowledgments and apologies section of the show, the section of the show dedicated to our Canadian viewers and listeners. So, do we have anything to apologize for, DJ? I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm actually apologizing for constantly double spacing after each sentence in Twitter. It's a bad habit, and I cannot stop. I'm sorry. It's just wasting characters, right?
Precious Twitter characters.
It's
Characters
hard
that
to stop.
would otherwise be used to
It
inform
was
the
ingrained,
masses.
like typing from elementary school.
Now here's a question though: do you still double space? Not double space, but double. Yeah, I guess it is a double space bar after the period. of the
Yeah,
sentence? Yeah.
every time. I can't stop.
It's a habit, isn't it? They told us to do that. That was what we were supposed to do, right?
I need to have like a macro to autocorrect that without letting me know that it's autocorrecting it.
Right.
But Roger's a professional, so he probably doesn't have that issue with double spacing, correct?
I get confused by
What's the Oxford standard?
the variance in grammar all over the blogosphere, as it were, because people write according to how they've been taught. So there are some changes. I mean, you do get a few people who will unfortunately spell a word where there should be a U in it and there's not. And then, of course, you've got the double spacing, and then you've got things like the Oxford comma. But at the end of the day, you just adapt. It's what people are saying that counts, not the actual technicalities of how it's expressed.
Well, from this point on, if we do have grammar questions, as the only British person on the show, we will defer to you.
That's not fair.
As the inventor of the language and all that.
I just make up my own rules as I go. Roger, from now on,
And I know on a serious note, Roger, you did want to mention the passing of Christopher Plummer.
Well, yes. When we these show notes were originally created a while ago, there was a reference in the show notes to Canadian listeners, and I just wanted at the time to just highlight my sadness at the passing of the great Christopher Plummer.
But you're still sad, right? So it still applies.
Yes, indeed. I miss him. He elevated Star Trek to a whole different level with his performance.
Yeah.
I knew the name, but I just had to look him up. And then I'm like, oh, that guy?
Yeah, that's kind of what I did too.
Thanks for bringing me down.
Yeah, when I first heard about it, it was one of those, that guy moments, because it wasn't until I saw a few different pictures of him in different things that I was like, I've seen him in quite a few movies. It's interesting.
Yeah. A lot.
All right, and of course we have our running apology for how long it's been since our last episode. I looked at our last Skype call, DJ. It was in 2020. It was the last day of 2020 was our last show. We did December 31st is when we recorded our last podcast episode. So I thought
we did a pandemic episode, didn't we?
what 2020 was the pandemic. It was.
Oh yeah. That
I
was.
know you forgot about that entire year, but that's when it
Oh,
happened.
I haven't left this office space down here. I've been stuck inside.
We'll get to that too. So let's go ahead and move into the video gaming aspect of the show, and I will start with Roger, our guest. What have you been playing lately?
Uh, MMOs are still a major mainstay for me. So certainly recently with the Blackwood expansion coming to Elder Scrolls, I'm back in that and absolutely love the companion system. I think that has elevated the status of that game for me purely because I think the companion system just makes the game so more interesting and enjoyable. I still habitually play Star Trek Online for my sins. I love that game despite its numerous flaws. But what else have I been doing? I bought a Switch recently. I bought the Nintendo Switch. So obviously Mario Kart was front.
Good man.
When you've got grandchildren, that is the way to go. Fall Guys, I'm still regularly playing that. That's again something that I play usually when the grandchildren come round because it's child friendly. I got myself an RPG recently. I finally caught up with Greedfall, which has been on the list for a while. It's been out for what, 18 months, maybe longer now. So it's the good time to buy it because you get a game that's been fully patched and there's plenty of wiki details out there for when you get stuck. So there's been certainly plenty to keep me going. What I did do with the Switch was I actually decided to buy an Assassin's Creed game, and it's just really interesting adapting from playing that sort of game that I usually play on a PC with keyboard and mouse to, okay, I've got a controller. How the hell do you do this? And I literally have pieces of A4 paper stuck around my computer telling me what keys to press on this wretched thing.
So, two things. You're definitely using the Pro controller with the Switch, right? Because
Yes,
my thumbs, the Joy Cons are meant for little kids.
absolutely.
You cannot possibly play those as an adult. But just a suggestion: if you do the Nintendo Online subscription, it's just a couple dollars a month. You get access to the retro Nintendo and Super Nintendo catalogs that they publish. So, pro tip: get your Mario World on.
I have, right, and I've already got access to that stuff. So.
Nice.
So I've also been playing some Blackwood, Roger, and I am in total agreement with you on the companion system. I think it may be the strongest system they've added to the game since they did the one Tamriel update and made everything level proof. So if it, as it were, I really think that I had high hopes for the antiquity system last year, where you would go around and dig up and find different things as kind of an archaeological, historical, learning the lore type of thing, different than combat. But what I found was the way that was implemented with the mini game system just wasn't enjoyable to me. And I kept getting drops for leads that were way beyond my ability to go find them because you have to level that system as well for whatever reason. And I just didn't really enjoy it nearly as much as I thought I would. This system, the companion system, feels like it belongs in ESO. It's not a mini game. They've taken some of your character progression from your normal characters and ported that over to the companion system to a kind of a lesser amount. And they just did a very, very good job with it. And I think it does bring a lot. Your companion does says little lines every once in a while as they follow you around, which reminds me of how the Marvel Heroes companion system worked. They would do a little bit of banter back and forth, and you get to level the companion not only skill-wise but also relationship-wise. So the better relationship you have with them, the more you learn about their background and where they've come from and what they're all about. So I think it's stellar, and I think it's made the Blackwood expansion a lot of fun, which is actually a pretty good expansion anyway, or chapter. They don't want you to call it expansion. Sorry, Rich Lambert. Yeah, the story, I think, within the Blackwood chapter has kept me more engaged than probably the last 2 or 3 chapters. I think they did a really nice job kind of with the breadcrumb system. Even though, if you've played ESO for 4 or 5 years like we have, it all gets a little bit repetitive. You kind of see the same stories over and over, as with any MMO. But I think it was the way that it kind of opens up as you go along in sometimes unexpected ways, was very well done. So that's been a pleasant surprise. Moving along, I guess, World of Warships is my PvP game that I play all the time. Elite Dangerous Odyssey is the latest expansion for that game that I've been playing around with a little bit, and I feel like I can only do that one in small doses because it also gets fairly repetitive, at least the pieces of it that I enjoy, because basically what Odyssey does, Elite Dangerous has been out since 2014, I think, or 2016, something like that. And the entire time that the game has been out, you basically have been confined to living in the cockpit of your ship. You fly the ship around, you can land on planets, but you don't get out of the ship. You can get out and use the SRV buggy, but you can't like get out and walk around until this June when they released, or this May when they released Odyssey, and they introduced a first-person mode to the game. So it was kind of a big change system-wise, and it was fairly. I think the concept is very solid. I think some of the execution is a bit lacking. It was a very combat-focused update, obviously, because there's an FPS element to it. And for me, I don't believe combat is something that Elite Dangerous ever did particularly well. So the fact that it's mostly a combat-related update made it somewhat uninteresting to me. I prefer the exploration aspect of Elite Dangerous. So, and they did do some updates for that as well. You get achievements for being the first one to walk on a planet and stuff like that, which is kind of fun. And you can get out and scan different life forms if you find them on planets that have the right conditions for that. Those things are interesting, but like I said, you can only do them so long before, one piece of bacteria looks just like another. So I think doing that every few days is kind of to use the terminology of the day, kind of a chill thing to do. In between my PvP and then my MMO stuff is a nice balance, I think. Lastly, I did try and play Fallout 76 for a little while. I'm beyond disappointed in that game. I think part of it is because I really enjoyed Fallout 4 a lot, and then to have the aspects that I enjoyed the most about the single player game kind of superseded by what they tried to do with multiplayer, was just very disappointing. And I thought that it was completely unnecessary because they had a good formula and they tried to make more money, I think, by coming up with this multiplayer system where you had kind of a subscription or battle pass style of revenue, and I just didn't think it was very fun. So I kind of gave up on that one.
Fallout: The Quest for More Money.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that I missed from the other Fallout game, and a lot of it was just the type of and they did add some NPC dialogue. I think we talked about this a couple years ago when it first came out, DJ, was that they had no NPC dialogue when the game was first released.
I remember that. I was like, how do you have a game that size, that magnificent,
Right.
no NPC like interaction?
Yeah. So they have added that, but it in ways it kind of feels like it was bolted on still.
Mm-hmm.
So
how would you know if another settlement needs your help, Brax? How?
Yeah, exactly. I don't have the Minutemen tapping me on the shoulder all the time. How about you, DJ? What you been up to?
Speaking of fun transitions, to your point about Elite Dangerous Odyssey adding first-person mode, in Euro Truck Simulator, you can now actually get out of the truck.
Ooh.
Oh, they copied Elite Dangerous.
Yeah. Feature hack. They released the Black Sea DLC for that game. So now we're traveling to Romania, Bulgaria, and apparently the European part of Turkey. I don't know what that is, but apparently we could drive there now. I haven't gotten that far yet, but I owned Subnautica since it was early access. I played it, hated it, deleted it, and then my son started playing again. It looked interesting. I replayed it, fell in love with it, beat it, played it again, beat it a second time, got 100%, achievements or whatever. And I can't figure out why. I think it was because it was too early access the first time. And so then I bought the second Subnautica that's still in early access. And once again, I kept running into some bugs and I hated it. So I'm like, I think I'm stuck in the cycle. Like, I shouldn't buy early access games. But just to show you the progression, I went from hate to love. The Invisible Hand came out. It is a game about manipulating stocks. If you're into that thing, it is obsessively exciting. The Dragon Quest guys over on some of our other sister channels, not our sister channels, but other network channels, they got me playing some Dragon Quest games, mostly on iOS. It's been my toilet game of the week. And this morning I bought a game called Power Wash Simulator. And I'm not going to lie, guys. I already have 3 hours invested in it. And I only bought it like 4 hours ago. It is unbelievably addictive. If you're into simulation games, you have to play this. It's just, you have to. It takes like when you're playing Farming Simulator, that excitement of like driving a combine straight down a field. And you're like, yes, I did that.
No, I don't know that.
It's the same thing, but with a pressure washer.
You would never need a game called Decline of Civilization Simulator. You're already living it.
There's a simulation game for everything.
I don't know what to say.
I had my suspicions because I watched a live stream once where a certain individual took unnatural pleasure in jet washing his combine after using it. So I suppose it's only a natural progression that they would now just move on to this sort of stuff.
See, the thing is like when you get done farming, you're done tractoring, and your tractor is all muddy. You just want to clean it off. Now, in Farming Simulator, when you use the pressure washer in Farming Simulator, you just kind of squirt the tractor, and it slowly just turns clean. In Power Wash Simulator, you legitimately have to hit every little nook and cranny. It is so obsessively exciting to play. I'm sure you're not going to see a lot of Twitch streams because it must be horrible to watch, but if you're like one of those people that love like mowing and straight lines, this is your game. That's all I gotta say. And it was the best $16 I think I've ever spent. It's on sale too.
That was going to be my next question. If it was on sale with the Steam sale,
it was. Like you can't take. You're like it's still, of course, once again, it's early access. You can't take a gamble on something like that without it being on sale. So.
That is the question. If it's in early access, that means that they're somehow going to improve it. How?
Exactly. More mud?
So I'm interested in just a very few things about this game. Not very much at all, but just a few things. So does it just give you different like vehicles to power wash, or is it like somebody hired you to power wash their house, or...
There's freestyle mode where they just dump you in an environment, okay, and then there's a career mode where your first thing is your partner buys a van from an auction and you have to clean the van, and you're literally just sitting in a garage and the van's all muddy, and then you power wash it, and suddenly that's your pressure washing company van, right? And then you go to somebody wants their motorcycle clean, then you get hired to do someone's backyard and someone's garden, and I just got hired to do a park, like a playground at a park, and you get there and you're like, oh my god, there's so much stuff to power wash. So
okay.
and you get money, and then you could buy better equipment and different heads and more chemicals, and like there's a business aspect to it too. But
Okay.
I'm only 3 hours into it, and I honestly, looking at the content so far, I would not be surprised if I could easily do like 50 hours of play
Now
off
you
this.
say only 3 hours, but you're already watched an entire park. I'd say that's pretty good
No,
progress.
I just started. I didn't even finish the slide, and I had to stop because we were gonna podcast.
Yeah.
Unless you want to.
Thanks for finally getting on Skype, by the way. It was fun. 3 minutes before the show. Oh, I guess I'll get on.
Maybe they can do some DLC where you can make some extra money by working for the mob by pressure washing crime scenes or something.
Yeah. So JM Wiles in chat asked if the cat survived. Now in the tweet I put a picture of me pressure washing a cat on top of a barn. It's a thing. It was sitting there. It's its fault. It's in the way. I was doing the roof. So the good news is that it makes me actually want to physically go outside and actually use my pressure washer on my own actual van, which would probably be good because I've been sitting inside this entire time due to Corona, which goes into our next topic. Twist.
Thank you for that segue. And I do think, being that we are geographically dispersed and somewhat culturally dispersed, that it would be interesting to talk from an aspect of our own COVID experiences. Now that we're kind of out of 2020 and halfway through 2021, the pandemic's been going on for over a year. Arguably, in some countries, is close to being over, and in others is just starting up again, flaring up again. So my thought was we could kind of go through our experiences. And Roger, you already talked about having COVID. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that at all. Neither one of us did. I don't believe, DJ, you didn't have COVID, did you? I never got it. So out of the three of us, you're the only one who's actually had the hands-on experience, so to speak.
Yeah, COVID became a reality in the UK in early March because no one bothered to close the borders. So, it's a major travel hub, the UK from Europe. So, yay, in came COVID. And I was quite surprised because the government implemented quite a substantive lockdown in the UK from March to July. And during that time, around about mid-April, over one weekend, I thought, oh, I think I might be going down with a cold. I'm feeling a bit fluey, a bit tight in the neck and the shoulders. And it progressed over 14 days from feeling, oh, I think I might be going down with a cold to, oh, hello, I think I've got flu-like symptoms to within 4 or 5 days, suddenly, wow, this hurts. It feels like someone's got me in a bear hug all the time. And then breathing became noticeably difficult and painful. Not to the extent where I panicked and thought, is this where I need to go to my local hospital? But it was unpleasant. Now, my office here is also the spare bedroom, or some people would say the spare bedroom is the office, but they're splitting hairs. So I just shut myself away for 14 days, and Mrs. P left food at the door. And then she'd say the bathroom's clear, and I'd go to the bathroom, and then afterwards she would throw petrol in there and light it. And it was probably the most ill I've been for a very, very long time. I had 5 or 6 days of the acute tightness in the chest, the flu-like symptoms, muscle pains, cramps, dehydration, disorientation, tiredness. And then after about 2 weeks, within 48 hours, it was like someone just flipped a switch. And the most dramatic symptoms suddenly ceased. But long COVID is a thing, and it has taken me until I would say about March this year to fully get back to what I would say is being my normal standard of health.
Dang.
Despite the fact I got rid of the immediate COVID symptoms, the persistent ones were lethargy, tiredness, muscle pains, intermittent cramps, and then just this compulsion to sleep And when it hit you, you really needed to sleep, because if you were doing a task, you would just lose the plot with the task and possibly have an accident. So this situation finally resolved itself when I had my second vaccination. I felt demonstrably better 3 or 4 days after my second COVID vaccination, and I have a sneaking suspicion. My local doctors were very supportive. I actually said to them last September, I think I have long COVID, and they took it seriously. In fact, they actually put me in touch in one of the senior training hospitals in central London, and I actually got in touch with them, and I was filling out surveys for them because they were desperate for information about it, because it is one of those things where they reckon 1 in 10 who've had COVID will then have long COVID. Now, when you think about the population of the US, 1 in 10 of people who've had it is going to be a very sizable group.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they need to figure out how you deal with this, because it manifests itself differently. But anyway, that was my COVID experience. It wasn't great, but mercifully it was over quickly, and mercifully no one else in my household had it. Obviously, the main concern being my mother, who's disabled and is housebound. And obviously, we did our utmost during the whole situation to try and shield her and keep typhoid carrying pariahs from knocking on the door and infecting her.
Yeah, well, that's it's always scary, and I know when I saw that you had it, I was nervous for you, and of course that was right in the middle of when the worst of the worst news was coming around. So certainly glad that you feel a lot better and are somewhat fully recovered. And it's interesting that you talk about them not knowing much about long COVID, and I think probably part of that was because so many of the part of it is because it comes afterwards, but part of it is because we've been so focused on the immediate impact of having COVID and the people getting through that really, really rough period, that we'll just kind of deal with the rest of it as it comes later down the line.
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say for really living where I do, we are probably in some of the most fortunate situations when it comes to stuff like pandemics, because the town that I live in is 3,000 residents, and it's the school that my kids go to is not packed full of children. It's situated in a way that social distancing is not an issue like it is in a lot of the larger towns and cities. In fact, they were in physical school all year this year. All of my children were. And they did some things. Obviously, they had masks all year. They had the distancing requirements between the desks. They had shortened school hours, which was interesting. It wasn't really short. I mean, they only shortened it by maybe an hour and a half, but I guess for whatever reason that was something that they decided to do. And I'm talking mostly about my kids because they're the ones who are mostly exposed to other people. As DJ said, I worked from home for an entire year and still am doing that. So I wasn't leaving in fact, when we left the house, I was the one that was forgetting to bring my mask because I just wasn't used to wearing it. And everybody else had it with them because they were so used to going out and being around people. So, I mean, from that perspective, we were not nearly in as high of a risk category as someone who lives in a London or a New York or a Chicago. So that was fortunate for us. I did get vaccinated, got my second shot probably about a month ago. And honestly, the second one, I didn't even notice that I had been vaccinated, which was interesting because everybody said with the Moderna vaccine, which is what I got, the second one is what really hits you hard. Well, for me, the first one, it kind of made me feel like I just wanted to take a nap all day for like 24 hours. And then the second one, I had a sore arm, and that was really about it, which I was prepared to like take the day off from work and everything else. But it wasn't bad at all for me. So I was very fortunate in that respect as well. I will say that probably the fact that we are living where we are and that we're not exposed to people as much as folks in the city probably also contributes to some of the attitudes around where I live about the possible falsehoods of the danger of the virus, because there seems to be kind of a, well, obviously there's a political partisan split on this too, but just the fact that you don't see it in front of your eyes, and you don't have people that who have suffered with it, it tends to make you think that maybe all of this is just made up and being blown out of proportion. And I've heard that quite a bit. I don't believe it was made up. I mean, I obviously Rogers suffered through it himself. I know people who have lost loved ones, and it's a little bit distressing to hear those attitudes. But at the same time, I'm kind of glad that we are where we're at in the U.S. and that a lot of people have been vaccinated now and things are starting to open up, because I've really missed, I didn't think I would, but I've really missed the sense of normalcy that came with little things like seeing people at a sporting event or being able to walk into a hardware store and not wear a mask. Just little things that were so different from the way I'd lived my life for the past 45 years. It's kind of nice to see those things returning.
Absolutely. If I could just add, in the UK, the first lockdown, like I said, which was between March and July, it was taken exceedingly seriously, and it made such a demonstrable difference to day-to-day life. I mean, literally, traffic on the road reduced by 70%. So all of a sudden, it went quiet. I could sleep with the bedroom window open. And then within a couple of, well, a month and a half, it made a discernible difference to the night sky because smog pollution levels had dropped demonstrably. You would walk around and you wouldn't see people out. People would go out to go shopping at targeted times and they'd go straight back. They wouldn't do other things. They wouldn't stick around for small talk. So depending on how you lived your life, it would literally seem at times like it was the opening scenes of one of these sort of post-apocalyptic movies where are all the other people gone to and stuff. That changed in the subsequent lockdowns, and there's various reasons for that in the UK. But the first one, it was very uncanny, unsettling, because it's been so different to what day-to-day life has been for decades. All of a sudden someone just flipped a switch and everything that you took for granted had changed. There was no one about. People were genuinely scared initially in the UK. And also, I've got a certain amount of time for that opinion. Well, I'm not 100% sure if this is a real thing because I don't know anyone who's had COVID. And I won't dismiss that point of view. I deal with my mother. She's disabled. Therefore, all her extended social circle are people of a comparable age group. And therefore, I do know people who've had COVID and I know people who've passed away as a result of it. But then I can totally understand why people at the other end of the age spectrum, they haven't encountered it. No one in their social circle or their wider family. And I'm not saying that completely legitimizes every question raised about COVID, but I think, you initially approach things through your own personal experience. My son and my daughter-in-law, they both work for Transport for London, which is the body that regulates all transportation in central London, the subway network, all the buses, etc. They were key workers, so my granddaughters went to school and continued to go to school throughout the lockdown. And because they work in an industry where you deal with a lot of the public, they had a very, very high percentage of their work colleagues who contracted COVID and sadly passed away. So for them, it was a reality. But then for other people, and for lots of people, they will still say, don't know anyone who's had it. It's strange.
Yeah, here in Cincinnati, we kind of have a double negative where we think we're insulated because we're like, oh, we're the Midwest, and we're like, oh, we're still a small town, but like we're kind of like where everything sort of goes through from east to west, right? So people traveling through, or people, Ohioans love to travel. That's the thing. Like I run into people from Ohio everywhere on the world. So unfortunately, we're probably our own worst enemy, and that's probably how it spread so fast to Ohio. But yeah, when they shut everything down in March, to your point, Roger, yeah, we went from 100 miles an hour to nothing. In one of my vlogs last year, I actually went downtown and filmed empty streets for 10, 15 minutes because it was eerie just to be able to stand in the middle of a 4-lane, city street where normally you'd be crushed by cars and just nothing. So, fortunately, like Brax had mentioned, we're working in IT. We were very easy to transition to remote work. My company that I work for, it's a global corporation, but my exact division and my building that I'm in is completely filled with programmers. Like, I think we house 840 programmers. I work in the infrastructure side, so I have to manage physical data center space and hardware. So unfortunately, I did have to go in a couple times, even during the hardest lockdown part. Yeah, and driving into the data center at noon in like March, and I'm the only car on the highway. It's just weird. It was, I mean, finding a parking spot was easy. So, and then you walk in the lobby and the security guard's like, "Stay back," You sit there with a squirt bottle and like, we don't want to come within, close to each other. But it's been a life-changing event because it made me realize that, like, I used to think that I would enjoy a remote job, and now I really actually, like, I was telling Brax on Google Chat a couple days ago that I was like, I really think I could do a remote job now indefinitely, but I still do go into the office to fix things because unfortunately hard drives break and the cloud always expands. But I don't. It's weird to have that situation. Like you never are able to like sample another career or another job type until you actually do it, right? And this was a weird, eye-opening process to figure that out. But there are a lot of people on my team that you could tell they're just craving face-to-face time. So like we've started using webcams and stuff to help out because I was like, I don't want to go back. And the idea of me physically sitting in a conference room watching somebody write something on like a whiteboard or showing a PowerPoint presentation, just I think I'm beyond that point of job. It's like how can we possibly go back to that idea, right? Of sitting in a cube and watching a PowerPoint presentation and just like
It really
Now,
for us, the irony of that whole situation is that we had pretty much started doing remote meetings for almost everything even before the pandemic hit because we had such little meeting room space that was unreserved at our place. So everybody had started doing virtual meetings anyway. So
yeah.
we'd go in, we'd go sit in I'd drive 35 minutes to work, sit in a cubicle to virtually meet with all of my colleagues all day long, and then drive 35 minutes home. It's stupid.
Yeah. And most of my team my day-to-day team that I deal with, we're completely spread around the globe. So I don't even know what half the guys even look like because they don't have cameras. So, it's another funny side story to your point about driving to meetings and stuff. When the pandemic started, the building security people went around to everybody's cube after about a month of the building being shut down, and they started finding everybody's plants that were left on their desks, and they collected them on carts and they put them into a conference room on each floor. So on each floor there's a conference room that is completely filled with dead plants because for whatever reason they chose a conference room in the middle of the building with no light, no windows. I'm like, was this intentional? Like they could have put them on the windowsills or something, right? So now we have this like death room on every floor.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we kind of have transitioned into the whole workspace aspect, and this was tip of our minds because I know DJ, you've started going back into work full time. They're talking about us possibly starting to go back in part time, starting in July, so a couple days. Um, what's the culture like at your organization, and what do you, I guess, what do you feel is the future of work? Because this has really changed the way a lot of people look at how work can be done, especially for, IT people and in my case, IT security people and things like that.
Yeah, we have a gigantic corporation. Don't want to say the name, but it's a big one. um, they actually got credit on several business websites for being progressive at the very beginning of the pandemic, to actually declaring that they see hybrid or remote working as the future and offices sort of being a dwindling thing, right? Um, and when we read these news stories, and then they subsequently sent notices out to the entire corporation saying the same thing, saying, hey, you guys are doing so good working remote. Let's just keep this up. And if when things can be open, we're going to open the office. And if you want to come in, you can, but we'll encourage you to not come in, and we could reduce office space, et cetera, et cetera. And it worked great until one of the IT division heads, who he manages just the IT part of our global corporation. And of course, he's out of the UK. He made a decree that he's like, well, IT needs to be on site all full time. So he said that. Then suddenly all of the IT people had to start coming in. And that was last Monday. And last Monday was the first time I saw my entire team in well over a year. And we were all standing there 20 feet apart with masks on and a cube, with our heads up over our cubes like meerkats. And we're staring at each other. And then the power went out in the building, just, freak windstorm or something. And the power went out. And fortunately, knock on wood, the data center is well protected. UPS's batteries, the whole generators, everything kicked on. Data center's fine. Nobody cared. But everybody that was in the office physically couldn't work because there was no power. And we were all sitting there laughing. And I'm like, I wouldn't have had this problem if I was at my house, So, like, the people remote didn't even know that the power was out. That was the best part. But all the IT people were just stranded in the dark. But having said that, we've sort of since flip-flopped, and they've allowed a chunk of people to go back to being hybrid categorized, I guess. So I'm back to hybrid. So I'm back once again working from home, probably 4 days a week, and 1 day a week wearing pants. Boo.
As opposed to a bus skirt or something.
Yeah. Kilt, obviously.
Oh.
Now, in my case, sort of a point I forgot to bring up earlier is my kids both did remote schooling the entire last school year. So they were downstairs on Chromebooks 5 days a week during the day. And if somebody wasn't here physically watching them, I guarantee they just would have slept all day. They required very little supervision other than the fact that you had to sort of make sure that they're on their school call, right? And when I had to go back to work, my wife and I kind of panicked because she was back to work, and Roger, the movie theaters are open here. So yeah, we had a bit of a situation that we finally worked around it. But my wife, she was actually off furloughed for 5 months because obviously all the movie theaters closed down. And now She manages the largest theater here in Cincinnati, and they're fully opened up again. They've taken away all of the Ohio's cut back all the restrictions, so they allow employees to wear masks, and there still are like plexiglass barriers, but there's like no seating restrictions and they don't force you to wear masks, like walking around the lobby and stuff. So it's really weird. Just in time for the Fast and the Furious 9.
Oh joy!
Yeah. Was it worth it? Like, like out of all the movies you could open up for that movie? It's been an interesting, sometimes you want to talk about movies, Roger. The movie industry is wrecked. I got opinions about that.
I have opinions about the movie theaters opening up. I have not seen a film in a cinema since the last Star Wars movie. So that was December 2019.
Wow.
And to be honest, the pandemic is just a slight side issue. My main problem is there is very little turning up in movie theatres that I want to see because the prices in the UK keep going up and up and up, and I am getting at the very most average and bland films. Why do I want to pay between £15 and £20 to see something that is just distinctly average? Don't want to do it.
Dip, Roger.
If
Marry a movie theater manager. I haven't paid for a movie in 25 years, man.
The other thing is, I am a member of the National Film Theatre. I used to go up to central London to the British Film Institute, which is, as it sounds, an institution for people who are serious about movies. So you get to see classic films and stuff like that. They will have Q&As with people who have worked on those films. And the people in the audience are there because they are fans. They're not halfway through the film going to get bored and get their phones out and all that sort of nonsense. So there's a big sea change here at the moment. What happened in the UK, and I'm sure it happened in the US, was, yeah, you might open a movie and have it in a handful of theatres, but then it will also appear on streaming services virtually and also be available for sale. So everybody then goes to the platform that they like and gets the movie in a way that they want. And I think that's the way to go. Apparently, the numbers do show that they will still make as much money as they normally do. People just go to the actual outlet and platform that they desire. Broadly speaking, I prefer to watch movies in the comfort of my own home now, without to someone who's got, verbal incontinence and a tablet with a searchlight on it.
Yeah, I heard on one of our public radio stations a discussion where they said in the future they imagine that all the U.S. theaters will only play AAA movies like comic book movies or very obscure indie films. And I'm like, it kind of made me a little sad, but I could see it going that way. Like,
well, we're also at an interesting point in time, I think, where when the movie was released is not as big of a deal as it used to be.
Yeah.
It used to be you'd go and watch all the latest releases that you could because they were all good films, and you wanted to be the first to see them so that you could talk about them with your friends who were also going to see them at the same time. And what I'm finding is that people are going back and watching older films for the first time and sharing that experience on social media or wherever it is that they interact with people. We rented the film when we were on vacation. My parents had not seen the film Yesterday, which is a cute, charming little film. I really enjoy it. I've seen it. I saw it when it was in the theater, but they hadn't seen it. We paid $3 or $4 on Google to rent the film, and 6 people got to watch it. At the lake house, and
nice.
It's a 2019 film, so it's not new. But it was new to them, and it was still fun to watch that with them for the first time. I think you're seeing that a lot now. You're seeing that is kind of a shift in the mindset of people. They don't have to be the first to see a movie. They know it'll come around eventually, and they'll see it then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, be available on some outlet.
That's a charming movie to watch at a lake house. I'm a little jealous. And speaking of old movies, just for the record, tonight I'm actually watching Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves extended edition
There
on
you
my
go.
home theater behind me.
I'm
Thank
gonna,
you, Roger.
yeah. I kind of want to see it again too. It's been a long time, a
I'm
really
totally
long time.
watching it tonight. You can make it here, man. It's like 5-hour drive.
Weird, isn't it? That sort of Pavlovian response that you can have. Someone on Twitter will reference a film that you have an emotional connection to, and the moment they reference it and a few lines are swapped or someone shows a picture, it's like, I really need to see that.
You were talking about soundtracks, and for whatever reason, as soon as we start talking about Robin Hood, for the last week, that stupid Bryan Adams song's been playing in my head. Everything I do it for you. Like, get out of my head.
That's like number one in the UK for about 30 years.
Yeah, it was here too. It was always on the radio. Well, I guess
Wow.
just to quickly tag on to the work conversation, I don't want to dwell on this too long. I know Roger, you're retired and you're a permanent.
That's an interesting point. In 2016, I gave up full-time work because both my parents became very sick. My dad's passed away. I'm now looking after my mum, but at some point, I will probably have to return to the work environment because, spookily enough, I'm sitting on a ton of cash, and it's just curious because what will I do? The job market in the UK, as I'm sure it has in the US, has changed so massively now. And also, let's be honest here, I will be a 55, 56, 57-year-old man returning to a job market potentially. And we're not the highest on people's priority list because
Yeah,
people are seen falling down.
I'm hoping to be thinking about retiring when I get to be that age.
It's a good age to knock it in the head, but that's dependent on so many different things, isn't it? In the economy and things like that. You do the calculations. Can I afford to retire? And then things change in the economy, and it's like, oh, back to the workplace for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and for us, they're also lifting. They've lifted restrictions in my state completely, which is kind of interesting because as a Midwest state, we've been fairly progressive in following along with the more liberal guidelines. What people would say is more liberal, but actually is more conservative from the standpoint of being more cautious and careful. So the fact that our governor has actually said, who is basically much maligned by the Republican Party, by the way, has said, okay, we're going to open the state up is kind of a big deal. So when I return to work, they're going to, they've been really try to be very careful about the whole situation because there are so many different opinions. They're saying, well, you don't have to wear a mask and you don't have to social distance if you've been vaccinated, but you don't have to show proof of vaccination. So it's kind of on the honor system, but you can wear a mask if you're not comfortable and you can social distance if you're not comfortable. So please respect all those. It's kind of, it's what you'd expect from a large company,
It's
right?
extremely vague.
Right. It's kind of
just enough vagueness to cover their ass.
It's basically do whatever you want and don't make fun of people who do something different is kind of the guidelines they've come up with.
Yeah. How was because Brexit happened right at the beginning of 2020, right?
Yes, and Brexit. Let's keep this conversation to a minimum because we get dragged into a political black hole.
No, I don't want to go down a political, but I was just like, how did that really? Did it
Brexit
screw things, or did it
masks certain things of the pandemic and vice versa? But there are things that are happening in the UK which are problematic, which are a direct result of COVID, and then there are issues associated with Brexit that didn't manifest themselves immediately because they never were. They were going to take 6, 12, 18 months, and they are beginning to happen. Now, there has been a massive loss of people working in the haulage industry because they weren't particularly well paid to begin with. A lot of them were foreign nationals, i.e. Europeans. And then now, because of the new regulations that are in place, you don't seamlessly roll over the border. You can be held up at customs for hours or days. Net result is that industry's taking a hammering. So they are predicting issues like potential shortages and other sort of things manifesting themselves. Brexit is the gift that keeps on giving. It's going to be dominating the UK political agenda for years to come. Oh, good joy. That's all I can really say.
Were you able? I mean, but were you at least able to like develop your vaccine completely in country, or are you dealing with like supply issues of stuff that are stuck coming in,
No,
delaying the vaccine? Does that make sense?
The government was very wise and did all sorts of deals in that
Okay.
respect. Plus, also, a lot of these pharmaceutical companies that are dealing with the vaccine are international and they will get priority, etc. And it's the one thing the UK government threw money at. You can be legitimately critical of the UK government over its handling of the pandemic, as most countries can be of their own governments. But the one thing that they have done well was they enabled the NHS to deliver a very comprehensive and efficient vaccine rollout. And, 65 million people, okay, and a substantial amount of them have been vaccinated with both their doses now. So it will be interesting to see what happens when you can no longer say problem A is the cause of problem B, because problem B will be managed in some way. But that's a separate thing. Let's not do the political thing. It's so depressing.
Amen.
Yeah, it is. So for something that is definitely not controversial or political at all, I see DJ Pimp Daddy wanted to touch on the pros and cons of biscuits and gravy.
Yeah, because this came up, and I'm like, hey, he's on the show. Let's discuss this. Because Brax and I, Midwesterners, you say biscuits and gravy, we start drooling.
Well, here's
you say
the thing,
biscuits and gravy, and Roger was just like, wait, what? What's wrong with you people?
I'll let Roger expand on this, but just to intro this, DJ, I think something that you and I don't really understand very well is that people from England do not consider white gravy gravy. They consider brown gravy gravy, but white gravy is just fat.
And I don't think we ever came up with a description that they understand what a buttermilk biscuit is. Like it's kind of like a roll, but it's fluffy.
I don't want to assume anything. I don't want to assume anything about what they understand or don't understand about our cuisine. If you want to call it biscuits and gravy cuisine.
We struck a chord in the Twitch chat too, by the way. Somebody said they're zipping their southern lips to not comment on this.
Is that southern UK or southern US? Because there's a pretty big difference.
Biscuits. Where can we start with biscuits? When you use the word biscuit to someone who comes from the United Kingdom, so that means England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, they will consider biscuit. It is a sweetmeat. It's something that you dip into your tea. It is something that you have to sweeten your palate. I see the term cookie as being very narrow, where the biscuit is a broad spectrum. You have the bourbon, the custard cream, the Garibaldi, which is the noblest of biscuits because it has a wonderful name, and they're also known colloquially as squashed fly biscuits because they have raisins in them. When you talk about biscuits and gravy in the US sense, we have this wonderful thing called Google. So you just go, what is this alien thing? And then someone says, someone with a pipe, obviously a British person with a pipe, gives a video that tells me, what exactly this is. And you think, oh, that sounds perfectly acceptable. In fact, that actually sounds quite interesting. If I was visiting someone and I was presented with said biscuits and gravy, I would be most grateful and partake of them. But, gravy, again, you were right in your assertion. It is a spectrum in the UK. And broadly, people will associate it with brown gravy. So it will have, beef extract in it, or you will use the essential juices that come out of a roasting joint in your making of it. My personal favourite is horseradish gravy, which is a brown gravy which has a liberal helping of grating horseradish in it to give it some oomph. I have no problem with white gravy, but I would consider it more of a white sauce.
I
Right.
can see that. Yeah. You got to add the crumbly bits of sausage in it, though.
That is an interesting embellishment.
Yeah, that's like in my biscuits and gravy. The white gravy, it's got crumbled like sausage, like breakfast sausage.
Yeah, that's the
sometimes
only
a little
way.
spicy.
That's the only way to do it. That is the best way to do it.
JM Wiles in chat says, I already like Roger from his blog, and now he's pulling all the punches with the biscuits. Oh, and Brax, if you noticed, I got to use the band hammer. I finally got to moderate somebody in your chat.
I saw that. I forgot.
I feel powerful.
I forgot I even made you a moderator.
Use my spoon, and I made it hurt more.
You just earned your paycheck, moderator.
Oh, I see someone in chat has mentioned the wonderful institution of the Yorkshire pudding.
I don't understand what that is.
I don't know what it is either.
You're basically making a batter, a savoury, non-sweet batter, and then you put it into the baking tray that has the little indentations. You get these little small sort of spherical cooked raised batter puddings, and you have them with your main course because they are savoury. But then if you are particularly progressive, you can go all out and put sweet things on them like marmalade or syrup.
Kind of reminds me of like a cornbread muffin-y thing.
It does sound good. I'd like to try that sometime.
It does sound good. Yeah, I gotta look that up. Sounds like carbs, though. Something I can only eat on Saturdays.
Well, this is it. I mean, if it's tasty and nice, it's bad for you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We could all agree on this.
All right, we got to move the show along. Let's talk about what we are currently into. And I started with I don't think I started with you, Roger, on the last one because it was about Corona. Maybe. Oh yeah, I did because you had Corona. I'll start with DJ this time then.
Well, I put down that we watched the movie Nobody, which apparently none of my friends knew anything about. And it's difficult to explain what it is without ruining the plot, but it was fantastic if you're into that sort of thing. It kind of had like a Breaking Bad thing going for it, and then it just went all John Wick, and it was just like, I did not see that coming. It was awesome. I got sucked into listening K-pop.
Now, there's a story behind this.
Yeah, I was looking for something new, and I was vlogging, and then I started talking with the Catherine over at the Geekly Geek Network. She runs a show called Tea Time, and she always talks about BTS and all this other stuff. And for whatever reason, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it 30 days. I'm going to try K-pop. And I reached out to her, and she just started like, oh my God, let me school you on K-pop. And I was her project for like a month. And I attended 2 virtual K-pop concerts. Finally got to see BTS. And it's catchy. I'll give you that. Like, I could see how women are really into K-pop because I'm a guy, and I could comfortably say these guys, all the K-pop singers, are very handsome. They're very pretty, and but as a former DJ, like it's some banging tunes, and you can't not kind of nod along to the music. So it's good music, but it's pop music. So if you despise pop music, maybe skip it. But yeah, and I made a vlog about that, and that skyrocketed to my 3rd most watched vlog on my channel, which freaking K-pop people you gotta love them. And then I somehow started reading about Stoicism. I have no idea how that started. The book this week is The Obstacle is the Way, or maybe it's not the way. I don't know. The way the camera is, it's not the way. But so if you want to do a podcast about Stoicism, look me up. And then, of course, as of this morning, I'm now into pressure washing, apparently. So that's what I'm into. What about you, Brax?
Yeah. So I think last time I had started watching The Expanse on Amazon Prime Video, and I'm still watching it. I go slowly through these things because I don't watch them. I don't binge watch like people like to do nowadays very often. I usually watch 1 or 2 episodes a week. I'm still watching it. I've got to say it's pretty good. I tried to think of something I could compare The Expanse to. Well, first of all, it's in space, but it's a very, very gritty space. It's not like Star Trek space, and I think it's even more gritty than Star Wars space. Yeah, I would say it definitely is more gritty than Star Wars space. It's more like a Firefly space, in the look and feel of it, and from a kind of formula perspective, it reminds me a little bit of Lost. It's one of those where every time they solve a problem, 2 more come up, and then you go, well, how are they going to get out of these 2 problems? And they solve those 2, and then 4 more come up, but it's one of those things that it really makes you want to watch the next episode because they're so good at cliffhanging these problems at the end of every single episode.
I was with you until you brought that up, man. I
Well,
need order.
that's
This is
how
why
they
I'm
do it,
pressure
right?
washing. I need order.
Every time you think that, okay, well, they magically got out of this situation somehow, and sometimes it does feel kind of like magic. Um, all of a sudden, yeah, but you know what? But I think they actually do a better job at wrapping things up than Lost did because what they'll usually do is because of the way that you can arc stories in streaming series nowadays, they do a pretty good job of wrapping up like the majority of the issues both at the mid-season and in-season finales. So they do a little bit better job of that than I ever felt like Lost did. The cliffhangers from one season to another aren't quite as bad and apparent. They're more like, okay, now we're done with this year. We're going to start with the next year. I'm in season 4 now. I'm about halfway through season 4, and there are 5 seasons.
Jeez.
And my understanding is that it started on like a network TV, maybe Sci-Fi or something, and now has been picked up by Amazon Prime when it was canceled there partially because of fan reaction, because people really like the show. I would recommend trying to get through the first. I mean, like I said, the first few episodes, I wasn't sure if I was going to like it or not because it almost seemed like they were trying to be too edgy with some of the stuff, and I don't like when edginess is forced upon me. But the longer I watched it, the more I kind of started to get into the characters and what they were doing with the story, and they do a lot of. There's a lot of mystery kind of involved because there's this, kind of basically an extinct alien civilization that they discover little pieces of along the way, and what happened to them and why they're not around anymore and why is their technology so far more advanced than ours and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. It's a good show. The other thing I wanted to mention, just because I was so very impressed with it, was. So there's an author and naval historian named James D. Hornfisher, and I knew him a little bit from the fact that he had participated in some of the World of Warships streams when they were doing like historical naval streams, when they would do like a virtual naval parade for Veterans Day or whatever kind of naval holiday they were celebrating. And I thought he was very interesting. He seemed to kind of dominate the conversation, but it was because he had so much knowledge about the stories behind a lot of these naval vessels that they were talking about. What I didn't realize about James D. Hornfisher at the time was that he's also an author. And I learned this because about a month ago, James passed away, unfortunately. And I saw this, and so I started looking him up to see, how old he was and all the morbid curiosity things that you have when somebody passes away. And I learned that he was an author of some of these, they're books about naval history, basically. And so I bought one on Audible because I had a credit hanging out there. And it was called The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors. And I went on vacation to Minnesota a couple weeks ago, and that is about a 12 or 13-hour drive for me to get there and back, obviously. And I listened to that book all the way there and about 2/3 of the way back the next week. And it took me that long to get through it, but it was so worth it. It was about a specific naval battle in World War II where the U.S. had kind of fallen for a Japanese decoy and sent our main fleet of carriers after the decoy, and the Japanese Navy had sent three kind of different attacks against us when we were holding the Philippines, basically. And all we had was like a small fleet of escort carriers, and then about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 destroyers and even destroyer escorts, which are smaller than destroyers, which were kind of nicknamed tin cans because their armor was so thin that just about anything, even like I think I heard a 45 bullet could pierce the armor of these things. And they basically charged into the main fleet of the Japanese Navy as they were coming to try and delay them from sinking our escort carriers, the U.S. escort carriers. And it's just the way that he lays out the account is so, it reminds me so much of like a Ken Burns documentary in an audible form, because he will jump from one ship and tell a story, a whole backstory of maybe the captain of that ship, where he went to high school and what he did at the Naval Academy. And then he'll jump to another ship and he'll talk about a gunner there that did this and that and this. And he takes you all the way from the start of the battle and why it happened to even to the point of some of these, the survivors of this battle having reunions today, kind of like a Band of Brothers thing. And so it was just completely fascinating. And I got sucked into the whole thing. I didn't realize how, it was a great way to pass the time when driving, but it was also just really interesting to see how he was able to jump around, and yet at the end of this huge, however 30-hour epic storytelling adventure, to kind of take us from one point to another in a single battle. And that was just one battle, one naval battle within World War II. You think of all the stories of people that are involved out there, and he just the amount of information and the research that went into it was just very, very impressive to me. And I was glad that he was able to bring that to us. And unfortunately he's no longer with us, but he does have several other books out there that I'm going to be looking into at some point.
I know it sounds weird, but like, I think the idea of like these grandiose ship on ship naval battles is probably over. Like I don't think modern times it'll ever get to that point.
You're definitely right. The U.S. has no more active battleships. We don't have any anymore.
Yeah.
I think the Iowa was the last one to see active battle back in the Gulf War, I believe. And that was mainly just for shooting at the land. They weren't shooting at other ships with it. They were just bombarding the land. So
we're still going to keep making movies about it. What was that Tom Hanks movie we talked about last episode?
Greyhound,
yeah.
Greyhound, yeah. That was so good.
Yeah, I liked it.
Technical. Yeah, absolutely. It's a shame I wasn't on that show. I have a lot to say about that. Great technical film. Where was the character development?
Yeah.
They're like, it's Tom Hanks. You don't need character.
No, I honestly think there's 30 minutes footage that is somewhere out there that was taken out of that movie to make it just literally 100 minutes concise military history, because the technical aspect of that film was spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, Roger, what are you into?
What am I into? Well, we've touched on a lot of things. I've been watching a lot. The lockdown afforded an opportunity to watch a lot. I'm trying to develop a blog series at the moment about big movie franchises, because they've existed for years. They're not a modern thing. People go, look at the MCU. It's like, no, they made 14 Sherlock Holmes movies with Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the late 30s and 40s. So big franchises have existed for a long time. So I've been watching all sorts of movie franchises to sort of prepare for this blog post, and also just to catch up with some stuff. Stupid rhetorical statement here. There's too much good quality stuff to keep up with. Not so much television, not so much movies, but TV. There is too much good TV at the moment.
Yeah.
You have to make some very hard choices. Like you mentioned, The Expanse. That's been on my to-do list for several years now, and it's still nowhere near the top, because there's so many other good shows kicking around at the moment. I like to keep abreast of new shows. Um, and all the ones that I pick are the ones that seem to have problems, and then it's whether they get cancelled under one season.
Mm-hmm.
I like Clarice, which is a sort of quasi sequel to Silence of the Lambs, where they take the Clarice Starling character and it's what happened to her next.
Mm.
It's really well written. It doesn't do the things that you necessarily expect it to do, but it's been treated abysmally by the network that finances it. They stick it on at stupid times of night. So it hasn't quite found the audience it needs to. Now, mercifully, they've taken it off network television, and the season 2 is going straight on the streaming platform, Paramount Plus or whatever it's called in the US. So at least it's survived. So I'm pleased about that, because so many good shows get just sentenced to death after one season. I watched Daybreak. Did you? Any of you guys watch that?
No.
No.
It's by the guy who created Fringe.
Okay. I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
And the idea is you've got an alien vessel that broke up, and debris has fallen down on Earth, and it has strange and bizarre properties. So they set up a multinational team to deal with it. And the first 5 or 6 episodes were excellent because they focused on just what was happening. A bit of debris had fallen down in some Castle Rock type small town, and it was having a weird effect, and you didn't know. They hadn't done that thing that shows normally do, where they say, oh, these are aliens from the Crab Nebula who do this and do that. They didn't explain everything, and its enigma was what made it interesting. And then as the show progressed, they then introduced more of this sort of backstory legendarium thing, and that maybe, I think, made it a little bit weaker. But it was an interesting show. And then, of course, because it required you to have maybe 5 brain cells, it didn't find its audience. And it's like NBC just said, burn it. And it was like, no,
I gotta think.
I really hope somebody else options this. So, yeah, so obviously I've been playing my way through a lot of TV and watching movie franchise. I watched all the Conjuring movies, which are fun, but I didn't think were deep. You watch them second time round, there is a lot more attention to detail in those movies than what they actually deserve. The people that make them love them. Like there was a scene in Annabelle in which the lead actress is thumbing through a supernatural grimoire. And I saw a YouTube video. Some guy just says, they have created this grimoire, and it's not just filled with nonsense. It's all canonical. It all tells you the backstory of the demon, how this demon was invoked so many 100 years ago, and how it was defeated. And it's just like, well, no one's going to see any of that stuff when they're sitting in the movie theater. It's just like, oh, there's a woman looking at a book called Bad Book, Bad Demon. And that to me spoke of a film production where the people really loved and were invested in what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a shot in the arm, because so many films I watch these days, I just get the impression they're made by committee, where you've got some suit at a boardroom who says, we need a dog in a skateboard. Here's an extra $15 million, shoot some extra footage and put the dog. Take that character out, put the dog in. And what else have I been doing? Sorry, I'm trying to... I like walking for health and for pleasure. It's my passion. I'm very fortunate. I live in part of London where there's a great deal of green space still preserved in a major city. So you can do walks, and there is a preserved chain of walks around the rare area where I live called the Green Chain Walk. So I've been doing that. And I joined a walking club, a virtual online walking club. And the guy who runs it is a UK comedian, Marek Larwood. And he just walks for pleasure, and he films himself and uploads his videos. And they're not cerebral masterpieces. They're just fun. They just tap into what is joyful about taking a nice walk. And I'm not talking about 30-minute walks. I'm talking about when you go on 4, 5, 6-hour walks and hikes and stuff. It just taps into what a pleasant experience it is, and a great way to sort of calm down from the pressures of modern day life. and the fact that we live in this crazy 24/7 society, and yet you can, if you're fortunate enough to live in places where you have access to these ways, you can go and walk, lose yourself in a forest, not literally lose yourself, that would be bad, but you can just switch off from the connected society and then sort of focus on, blimey, yeah, there might be a bunch of stupid politicians around, but this tree in this forest and those plants and look, there's a sheep over there. Isn't creation wonderful, sort of thing? And I just like it for that. I think it's a very good way for sort of finding your headspace. So I'm a big advocate of that.
Just realized there is the website. This is awesome.
Yeah.
If I need to go on a walkabout in Wales, now I know a course.
It's the Cool Dudes Walking Club, as it's called, has its YouTube channel, and it hasn't reached the point yet where it's become a toxic community. Everyone who leaves comments on videos is actually quite civilized and polite and fun, and it's nice. Give it a year.
Yeah. Give it a year and you start getting haters like Jessica, who says, "You're not my real friend beyond Bossfights." Oh, you can't see the sign. I hate this webcam thing.
She knows who she is.
I framed this tweet, Roger. It says, "You're not my real friend beyond Bossfights." I don't know if you can see this. It just blocks it out. This stupidest green screen ever. It was framed. I guarantee it's framed. We got a hater.
I thought Beyond Bossfights was possibly the most benign podcast and thing out there. How can you have haters?
I don't know how it happened. So I was like, I got to print that out.
I don't think it's hate so much as she just doesn't. She doesn't want to be associated with the friendship aspect. We're just acquaintances. Yeah. We don't want to keep you at arm's length. Nothing too friendly. Because, you're a major corporation, and I don't want to have anything to do with that.
So, back to your point, Raj. I think one of the good things that's come out of the pandemic is the fact that even classic cinema and obscure television shows are pretty much all streaming on demand 24 hours a day. Yeah. That is so wonderful. I love the days that cubicle work is dwindling to nothing, and I love the idea that sitting down and having to watch television at a specific time is gone. Like that whole thing is just, I don't care about live television anymore. So now some people who like sports, like Brax, will probably argue for live television. But you could even get those streaming on demand.
You know what's funny about that you mentioned that. So we recently grabbed a Paramount Plus subscription for a discount, I think probably for Prime Day. My wife is always looking at those deals. Mm-hmm. And my youngest is a soccer player or football in European circles in the UK. And one of the things that we've been trying to get him to do is sit down and watch some quality games because he's a good athlete. He's an exceptional athlete, but he's not really a soccer player in the sense that he has a lot of the cerebral understanding of what to do at all, for his position at all times. And it's mostly
how to fake an injury.
It's mostly because he didn't grow up in that environment. In the U.S., if you're in our culture in the Midwest, as somebody who's family has been in the U.S. for 400 years, no, not that long, but you know what I'm saying. That hasn't been part. Now that's changing as we get more people immigrating here from Mexico and parts of Europe. But for the most part, when I was a kid, we didn't watch soccer. I mean, I don't even know if there was a way to watch soccer on TV. So it's not something I grew up doing, and it's not really something I grew up doing with my kids. So one of the things that we've done is with Paramount Plus, you actually get replays of some Champion League games, which is like some of the top quality clubs in all of the world play in the Champions League. So when I woke up today to try this out, I watched a game from, I don't know how many weeks ago it was, between Manchester City and I think it was Real Madrid. And it was new to me because I'd never seen the game before. I didn't know what the result was, and I don't follow either one of the clubs. So it was actually kind of enjoyable to sit down and just watch the quality of the play, especially when you compare it to, unfortunately, Major League Soccer here in the U.S., which is supposed to be the top level. Is, we're always going to lag behind because of the culture that I mentioned earlier, and until we get that generation of kids that grow up watching it, playing it, living it like they do in most areas of the world, we're not going to be able to catch up with that level. And you see even our top players, Christian Pulisic plays for Chelsea over in the UK, because why would he play here if he's that good?
Yeah.
But at any rate, it's just funny that you mentioned that the day that I actually did watch a Champions League soccer game that wasn't live.
Can I just interject, because I'm the worst person to ever talk about sport.
Admit it, you're a hooligan, aren't you?
Oh, no. Usually,
you want to raise hell and tip taxis over.
Your entry into sport comes through your family, doesn't it? It's either your parents or a sibling who's bang into sport.
Yeah.
And at a very young age, you then go to games for whatever your sport you're seeing, and that's how you do it. Now, I never had that because my dad was an academic. And he had a very snippy view about sportsmen, which I don't think was altogether fair. So it's not something that particularly was a big part of my life. My son was very fortunate because his godfather was bang into football. So therefore, he then regularly took him to games and stuff. So my son's grown up with a healthy interest in sport. But I've always been on the periphery. I actually wrote a blog post about how sport, it's not part of your life, it's like you've cut off an arm. Mm-hmm. You bung a couple of guys or a few people together at a training course before it starts and you're making small talk. 9 times out of 10, it will defer to something like sport as your opening gambit. And that is what then breaks the ice, and then people start. And I can't do that because people say, "Did you see the game last night?" And you go, "Oh, no, I was doing differential calculus." To which they say, "Burn the freak." But in my life, the two types of sport that I found to be most accessible for someone who knows nothing about sport are hockey, because it's not difficult to pick up the rules, and the periods that they play aren't excessively long before they take a break, and then it starts again. And so it's hockey and outdoor bowls. Outdoor bowls, you have a jack and you have to throw your bowl nearest to the jack, and if anyone gets their bowl in the way, you knock them out of the way.
Okay.
Gotcha.
These are entry-level sports, but they are brilliant. That's my say. If you know you're going on a training course, do a crash course on hockey and bowls. And everyone will still look at you and say, "Do you know nothing about football?"
I think we should,
Right.
we should change society here. Like, going forward, guys, if you're out there listening to this and you're at a party and your significant other walks off and you see another guy, walk up to him, instead of saying, "Hey, did you see that game?" Just be like, "Hey, do you play Star Trek Online?" You never know. You might meet your soulmate right there.
The only thing that I find confusing about hockey, is how do they know what the substitution pattern is? Because there seems like people are all of a sudden, it's like something will snap and 3 guys will jump off the ice and 4 guys will jump on the ice, and you'll be like, how did they know? What happened?
I like how they sort of encourage fighting to a point. And they're like, okay, just let them get it out, then throw one of them in the penalty box.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, is they get smashed up against the wall and they don't even care. They're just kind of like, yeah, well, that's how it goes. I'll just smash him later, Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, where are we? What are we looking forward to, DJ?
Apparently, I'm the only one that's looking forward to something.
DJ, and yours doesn't even count. So
what? Farming Simulator 22 is coming out this year.
New things to power wash.
Yes. And one of my favorite documentary ends, if you want to call it, Anthony Bourdain. Somebody made a posthumous documentary about him called Roadrunner. That's coming out next month. And I think, Roger, that's actually going to be the first movie I'm going to go see probably actually in the theater. Like we binged watched the entire Parts Unknown series, like 13 seasons or something during the pandemic, and that was just it was heartbreaking to get to the end of that and you're like, it's over. Like that one hurt to finish.
Yeah.
He's such a great worldview though. He could find like the best parts of every society. It was such a
and I along those same lines,
Bourdain.
That's what I'm looking forward to. Is actually, I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. Just going to a theater and knowing that it's open and being able to sit wherever I want, to be able to order food at the concession stand, possibly if you don't mind taking out a loan first. Just to be able to do that kind of stuff. Now I am happy to say, when we were in the middle of the pandemic, there was a Twitter thing going around saying, what was the last film that you saw in a theater? And I was very happy to be able to report that the last film I saw in a theater made me sound really smart and theatrically involved like Roger, because it was 1917. So that's not a bad one to kind of end your theater experience with if you're going to do it that way. Now, typically it would have been a Marvel movie or something like that, but it just happened that was the one. And at some point, we're going to talk a little bit about Marvel. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I know, because neither one of you guys are really as into it as I am. And honestly, I don't even know if I'm as into it as I used to be. But I do still follow all of the Disney Plus things that they're doing. And I'm kind of impressed at the quality that they've been able to put into those series, because it's right up there with the films, just about, as far as like special effects and things like that. Where they didn't used to spend money on TV series, now they're starting to do that. I think they're starting to see a return on that. So it's kind of interesting to see that shift. My biggest complaint about the Disney Plus series is that because they're spending so much money on them, they're only like 6 episodes long. And I would really like to see about 12 or 13 or 14 episodes in a season. And because I think they could tell a lot more story if they did it that way, but I know it's expensive to do. Anyway,
so listeners out there, if you are huge into the MCU and you want to actually sit in my seat pretending you're me while Brax talks about it, I will pay you to sit there.
I'm really not that bad, am I? I'm not that bad.
Otherwise, that show, I'm just gonna be sitting there like,
I could probably talk a little bit more about the Battle of the Tin Can Sailors now than I could about the MCU.
That sounds fascinating. Let's do that show.
Anything for you, Roger, that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, it's interesting because you sort of touched upon it. Also, I mentioned earlier about big franchises, and obviously the MCU, massive franchise. I don't have the same relationship with it, but I'm fascinated by the MCU as a sort of product. The same way as a lot of us are interested in EVE Online, although we don't play it. There is the MCU and the transition of the MCU out of movie theaters onto Disney Plus, or a great deal of it. It's a fascinating thing to watch from a marketing point of view. I liked Star Wars when it was 3 films. The prequels wasn't too happy with, and then I thought that the 3 more recent ones were a dog's dinner. For all sorts of reasons, and I won't get into that, not just to arbitrarily write it off, I just think it was very badly handled. To me, it's like, if you're going to make 3 movies, shouldn't you have the plot lines for all 3 arranged before you even make them? Rather than I make a movie and then some drunk person rolls in and starts making the next one. But I think The Mandalorian fixed a hell of a lot of stuff. Even my other half watched both seasons of The Mandalorian without having any knowledge or interested in the wider Star Wars universe, because it was just such an accessible show. She just said, "This is a Western." I went, "Yeah." with some Kurosawa thrown in,
Yep.
So one of the things that I'm looking forward to is Amazon Prime's Middle-earth based TV show, which they're still playing very close to their chest. We know that they've already commissioned at least 2 or 3 seasons that they're making now.
Mm-hmm.
that it's set in the second age of Middle Earth. It looks like it might cover the downfall of Numenor. It's got a fascinating cast because there's no A-list names in there. It's got lots of interesting character actors who are known regionally. Like there's a couple of British actors in there who won't be particularly well known outside of the UK, but I can guarantee you they'll be damn good. So I'm working on the premise that all the Australian, New Zealand and American cast are going to be comparably as well cast and very, very good. I'm just fascinated because Amazon have put $1 billion so far into this.
Damn.
On a risk that they made it clear they wanted their own Game of Thrones. They want a show that's going to hold people's interests over multiple seasons. Well, this is it. They've got a killer franchise. They've got a brilliant story. I am very curious to see. Bearing in mind that some episodes, the first couple of episodes have been directed by, the guy who did The Orphanage, and more recently he directed the last Jurassic World film. Is it J.A. Bayona? Anyway, interesting director. Because he's not the sort of classic mainstream US director. Also, they've got someone in who's worked on The Witcher, who's now going to be doing some of the more recent episodes. You just think, okay, these are interesting. You're not doing this in the way that maybe I expect you to do it. So I'm just very curious to see how it's going to pan out. And the
Colin Trevorrow, is that who you're talking about?
He did the Jurassic
World,
and then the next one that had Toby Jones. Sorry. Nick Market reference there. I'm just curious because this is going to be fascinating. Even if it's a massive disaster, there'll be this brilliant drama in the purists absolutely throwing all their toys out the pram. Pronounce the name wrong. That in itself is going to be absolutely brilliant.
Will Tom Bombadil be in this film?
Predates. Technically, you could say it predates him, but theoretically, he was alive in the world.
That's right. There you go. You've already started.
Yes. And also, my favourite people, the pronunciation police.
I have no experience with that at all.
Bring that up with it. It's a sore point with Brax. Let's not bring up Tolkien pronounces with Brax. Show will go on for another hour.
I think my favorite criticism, though, was why didn't you do it in a British accent? Well, obviously they didn't hear my podcast episode where I tried to do that.
Don't they know that Midwestern is the proper dialect?
Maybe I guess not for
the rest of the world needs to catch up to the Midwest.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, Roger. My wife has even, since she works in the industry, it's been amusing to see the decline of some series. Not the decline, but like the destruction it's caused. Like the latest James Bond film keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And like I was a diehard Bond fan from since I was a kid, and I've watched every single movie several times. But yeah, even recently though, it's just like I don't know if it'll survive continuously being pushed back, right? Like eventually they're gonna have to either release it or dump it to video.
We live in a world which is very much you're engaged with what's there, and the moment something is not there, you've forgotten about it and you move on to the next thing. And this film was completed 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And it's been released 2 years ago, and it's got an interconnected story. So everyone's going to have to watch the previous four Bond films to bring
exactly.
it back. And also the demographic that watches Bond is slowly getting older, where the mainstream cinematic audience, at least in the US and parts of Europe, is still people say under 30, 16 to 30, that sort of thing. Do they really give a damn about Bond? Isn't he something that their mum or dad likes?
They're probably been replaced, honestly, in the U.S. by like Jason Bourne series, and like I think even like the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible stuff sort of phased. That crowd's kind of come and gone, but now it's all Fast and Furious, right?
Yeah, they'd much rather see Vin Diesel and and The Rock, and I believe even Mr. Cena has graced the latest movie, as it were. So that's just going to be. Well, it's horses for courses, isn't it? But no, I think Bond might have actually shot itself in the foot. This movie might make money, but it won't make as much money as they hoped it will. And I think the franchise will then maybe go on hold for a couple of years, and then they'll have to come up with a really inventive way, because it always does reinvent itself.
So I'm saying they'll probably reinvent it, and Bond will be a girl or something, right?
Or a panda.
Maybe.
All right, guys. Well, I will say that we have no feedback, partially because I forgot to ask anybody for, ask us anything or feedback before we went live, which was also a surprise to me.
You're welcome.
But if you have feedback on the show, you can send it to braxwolf@gmail.com. I'll read it on the show. Reminder that Beyond Boss Fights is on iTunes, Spotify, Player FM. We'd appreciate any of your ratings and reviews on any of those channels. As far as contact information goes, DJ, you want to throw yours out there?
Twitter @DJPimpDaddy is pretty much the thing. Just look me up. If you Google DJ Pimp Daddy, that's me.
Roger, are you interested in giving anybody any?
Oh, absolutely. Free publicity is free publicity. On Twitter @ModeratePeril, or you can find the blog at containsmoderateperil.com. All opinions are my own.
As for me, you can find me on Twitter @Braxwolf, that's BRAXWOLF, email braxwolf@gmail.com. I still do occasionally blog at braxwolf.wordpress.com. I appreciate everybody showing up for the live show and for your downloads, listens, comments, feedback, and friendship.
Roger, it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much indeed, the pair of you, for inviting me on the show. I do greatly appreciate it. It's nice to sort of come out of quasi-retirement and be back on the air, as it were. I do miss podcasting. I used to do it weekly, and it was fun. It was a lot. And today has been a lot of fun, so thank you.
The Welsh troll says, thanks for the show, guys.
Thanks, Welsh troll. Okay, so I've stopped the recording, and I'm about to stop the stream. Thank you all for showing up for the stream. Again, I forgot to show the post-show card. There it is. It says, thanks for watching. It's been 6 months since the last episode.
We got buttons. And the software updated, and all your buttons have moved.
And at this is the point where I press the stop streaming button, and then I tell my co-hosts all the things that I screwed up in the middle of the episode.
This is the real apology section right here.
This is where I apologize to the people who really matter here. Thank you all for showing up. I appreciate it. And we will try and do this more often as life allows.